And our fourth main topic today gets submitted to us by Junior Otay, who writes, it's probably somebody I know wrote that in. Anyway, it's an insider thing. Okay, Junior Otay writes, did you see that the Warner Brothers CEO just admitted that they made a mistake moving everything to HBO Max instead of doing the proper movie releases? Well, that's not exactly true, Junior, but we'll get into that in a second. What do you think made me admit it? Probably means made him admit it. Was it all the directors complaining about it? The other money companies? Do you think this will affect anything moving forward? All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, Junior. Now, what Junior's referring to here is, of course, what I think was one of the greatest mishandlings and botched situations in the history of big studio management. When Warner Brothers and WarnerMedia decided, without consulting their directors, without consulting the filmmakers, without consulting the shareholders, without consulting the financial stakes people, without consulting their production partners, unilaterally, without consultation, came out and made the announcements, hey guys, all of our 2021 movies, we're just moving to HBO Max, and then ducked for cover. As people like Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, and other James Gunn even, came out and lambasted them for that decision without talking to anybody. Of course, Legendary Pictures then came out, the company that financed a number of their big projects, came out, threatened litigation, all this kind of stuff. Now, we've seen some things move, and WarnerMedia has come out recently and assured everybody that in 2022, they're going back to their regular theatrical model. But it was one of the biggest bonehead moves ever done. You cannot make a move like that and not bring in all the shareholders, all the stakes holders, if you will, all the people who have vested interests in all these movies, and consulting them, letting them know what you're thinking, hearing from them. At the end of the day, you're still WarnerMedia and you're going to make the decision you want to make. But to not consult these people or even give them a heads up was one of the dumbest Bush League moronic things that they could ever possibly do. And I think what has now become apparent is that they kind of realize that's the case. This comes to us when Jason was being interviewed on Vox's podcast. WarnerMedia CEO Jason Kilar said the following: there is no doubt that it was bumpy back in early December. That's when they made their stupid announcement. It was a bumpy ride back in early December of last year. If I had the chance to do it over again, I think it's very fair to say that we would have taken a couple more days. Why not months, you moron? We would have taken a couple of more days to see if we could have even more conversations that we were able to have. Basically, he's admitting, now, this is not, unfortunately, Junior, this is not them saying or admitting that it was a total, complete mistake to move things to HBO Max. That's not what he's saying. But he is kind of at least showing the chink in the armor and saying, we botched it. We didn't handle this right. Acknowledging that not talking to the people who have vested interest in these things, the people who have written these movies, who have directed these movies, who finance these movies, not at least having conversations with all of them to hear their point of view and to give them a heads up at the least, other than, a legendary, Rob, your Legendary Pictures, you put up $75 million to make one of their movies, and you wake up, pick up your iPad and look in Variety, and you see an announcement that your movie that you finance is being moved to streaming. Like, that's not the way you do business. It's not the way to foster relationships. Warner Brothers has been forever known as the director's studio. The studio directors love to work with. And now you've got all the top directors in the world saying, F you. And Denis Villeneuve actually writing an op-ed piece for Variety, destroying them. I'll say this, Rob. It is refreshing to see a studio head like Jason come out, because look, everybody makes mistakes. Do not think for a second you don't make mistakes. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It is very rare, though, to see a studio head come a little bit forward and at least a little bit say, I should have done things differently. At that level, it's kind of refreshing to see. And I think that is probably, Rob, I don't know this. This is just me speculating. I think this is probably an indicator of probably a lot of conversations Jason Kilar has had to have with people at Legendary with Christopher Nolan, with Denis Villeneuve, with hundreds, if not thousands of other directors, writers, producers, who they kind of blindsided attacked with. This was a WWE coming out of nowhere from behind with a chair across the back of your head. This is what WarnerMedia did to a lot of people. And it is at least kind of nice to see him saying, yeah, if I could go back and do it differently, I would. Because that at least kind of suggests that maybe that's something that won't happen again in the future. And again, we're not even talking, Rob, about whether or not it was a dumb move in general to move movies to HBO, but it's the way they did it and how they did it. And they backstabbed a lot of their partners in the way they carried it out, which is why a lot of them got really pissed off. It's nice to hear him acknowledge this. So it kind of brings up the whole open gaping wound again. But at the same time, I think it's a good sign that says this is probably something WarnerMedia and other studios hopefully won't replicate in the future. Rob, you hear Jason's comments on this. What's your reaction to them?
Well, I mean, look, like you say, winning changes everything. And when a movie like Godzilla versus Kong performs as we emerge from COVID, sure, it's easy to say, well, we're reconsidering. And obviously Legendary that made Kong, they have Dune coming out. And Jason wants to keep Legendary happy, and luckily Legendary looks like Kong might even outgross 2014's Godzilla at the box office. So again, you're playing all these games. But I mean, I understand where Killar was coming from. And you gotta go with the flow. They made a mistake. You know what? Kudos to him for he's now one of the biggest power players in Hollywood. He's coming out going, yeah, I messed up. Maybe I should have not done that. But you know, in the situation that they were in, basically they had to do something. And I think what they did was probably a smart move at first. It certainly didn't harm Godzilla versus Kong, this day and date thing. But then they realized that as we move out, if you don't want to leave, like we've always said, John, movies get value based on their box office performance theatrically.
Yeah.
So if a movie makes $1 billion at the box office, or even 3, 4, 500 million, that's a win. That means the general public perceives these films as having value, more so than if they just played on streaming. And you never want to diminish that. And I think Disney's been pushing Black Widow back far for the same reason. You know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has value because each film on the average grosses $1 billion. Why would they want to upset that by releasing Black Widow before its time, when it can still look, if Black Widow made $500 million, that's still an epic win for Disney. So I'm thinking, man, they want to reconsider. They are reacting like anybody should to different and changing conditions. And I think it's a good move, depending on where we see things could change again.
Yeah.
But I think for where we're at now, for Godzilla versus Kong's performance, it's the right thing to do, the right thing to say. And I think it shows great leadership as far as he's concerned. And everyone's looking at him because what is WarnerMedia going to do next?
Well, let's revisit a question we've asked ourselves a couple of times. And I think it's worth revisiting every couple of weeks because, as you say, the conditions and circumstances are constantly changing. Let's look ahead again to Dune. Dune is obviously one of the movies that Legendary was most upset about, that obviously director Denis Villeneuve was most upset about. In now, where we are today, I'm not going to hold you to this because where we are 2 weeks from now can be completely different. But where we are today, do you think WarnerMedia at some point will shift Dune from being a day-and-date release on HBO Max and theaters and just go strictly theatrical as the way that Legendary wants it to be? What's your guess right now?
You know, again, I think right now things are on the uptick. It looks pretty good. And I think that everybody wants theatrical releases. And I think that these movies are expensive. They have a lot of money on the table. And, you know, for things that are upcoming, like a movie like Dune, they wanted to have a concurrent TV series on HBO Max, the Sisterhood of the Bene Gesserit, or whatever they're going to call it. I mean, Legendary, WarnerMedia, it's to everybody's benefit to get movies out theatrically, first and foremost.
Right.
And I just think that's what they're trying to do. Everybody wants to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and what we talked about earlier, Snake Eyes, Paramount wants to do that. You know, they're moving. Didn't Spiral, the Saw movie, that got moved up?
Yep.
You know, and I think that look, I want to see movies in the theater, but business-wise, everybody needs movies to open theatrically and do well. The whole business does.
Yep. The whole industry needs it. Question is for you guys. What do you think about this? I mean, it reminds me again of just how dumb the move was in the first place, but it is kind of refreshing, I got to see a head of a company like this come forward and say, hey, you know, I think we may have made a mistake in how we handled this. How do you guys see this, and what do you think the repercussions are moving forward? Jump on down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, guys.